Welcome to Own Your Happy, and I have Janine Chay today. And it actually just crossed my mind the other day that I was like, I talk to people all the time, but I haven't shared the person that I talk to on a regular basis with you guys. So Janine is here. Janine is an empowerment coach, which is so fitting for her because that is exactly what she does all of the time and has for as long as I've known her, way before she got into the coaching industry or online business of this sort in any capacity. But you've just always empowered people as long as I've known you. Like, that's why we became friends, essentially. I was like, without like knowing it at the time, even the word really, I was like, I need some empowering. I drove to Regina with my children to be empowered by Janine one afternoon. And then we just became really good friends. And it was just like, feels like we've been friends for 20 years, but it's really only been 5, which is
Five-ish.
pretty good. 5 is a long time. We're
It
coming
really is.
like itchy 7 years or whatever they say about those things.
Do you think we'll make it?
Yeah.
We should celebrate our anniversary.
We should. We will with something.
Yeah,
It will be amazing.
I'm
And so
excited.
today we're going to chat about how people are sometimes just like seeming to throw in the towel about 2020. Like it's just and you know what? I've even caught myself. I said to my sister the other day, I'm ready for 2021 in the meaning of we've started school. This is September that we're recording this in, and we've started school with COVID, and there's so many different guidelines and regulations with everything. And I love the teachers and I love our principals, amazing. And I know everybody is really trying to do their best, but it's just different. Nobody knows exactly. It's just such uncharted territory for everybody that one school is this way, another school is this way, another one is this way. We're all even in the divisions and it doesn't matter. And there's just no set of rules. And so that's where I was like, okay, I'm ready for 2021 and to everybody just kind of know the drill and know the system and not be afraid of a sneeze or those things. But I know there are a lot of people throwing in the towel on much bigger aspects to do with 2020. And so that's what we want to chat about today. What would you say is the biggest?
Well, I think for a lot of women, they hadn't really admitted it, but they had thrown in the towel on themselves long before COVID ever came around, right? And so I think every year we all get to that point at some point. It's different for everybody where we're like, I'm so done with this year. Like, I can't wait till next year. And this year, I think collectively, that feeling is like, oh, let's just be done with this already, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't even know, it's not like 2021 is going to come and we're going to be done with it. We don't actually know what's going to happen. And so, yeah, I think that it's time that we stop throwing in the towel.
What do you think? I have my own theory on what COVID, like we both believe good things have came from a global pandemic. And so let's just get that right out of the way. But there's also been some hard times. But for me, I think quarantining and staying home and having much more home time and no activities to numb ourselves with really shone a spotlight on insecurities we had or places we needed to work on ourselves or whatever personal development we had kind of been pretending and putting a mask on. It was like the masks were peeled off and now I'm stuck with my people in my home and it's uncomfortable and I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah, I think the mom guilt is running at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. And especially with kids back in school, now there's this weird like, oh, thank God. And then also like, oh, like, I can't believe I think that, you know, like the mom guilt it's wild. And I keep talking to people about like, have this gratitude for change. Mm-hmm. Like that's what's happening here. And yeah, like it's a pandemic. So like there are going to be things that come from this that are not desirable. Obviously, I'm not minimizing that, but there's been a lot of good change that's come. And if we can embrace that, it's going to make moving into 2021 and beyond so much easier. Yeah. And isn't that what we want? Some ease?
Exactly.
I know for me, like, look at your word behind you, ease,
Uh,
like that's what we want, is to live a life that is like, it's easy.
yeah, it is. And with that change piece, I don't know that people understand the depths of what happens in their brain and their nervous system with change. And so I just want people to give themselves permission and grace on that as well, because often we don't make changes in our life because it feels hard, because it is wired in us the way we've done things. And so with how 2020 transpired, there was a whole lot of change without any choice.
That's right. Yeah. And I found that not only were we navigating this whole idea of like regulating ourselves, regulating our own nervous system, but then we were stuck at home with other people in our home, right? And there was a lot of dysregulation going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has caused, it's just caused so many things. And I think that it's time to start owning it. Like, take back our power. We don't have to be stuck in this like ugh all the time. We don't have to live like that.
Nope.
We can change that.
And isn't it fascinating how with having those massive changes, let's say in our life, that our immediate reaction is that it is yucky, right? Like the brain is so fascinating that way, of how we tell ourselves that this is a bad thing because we've attached it to this global pandemic, instead of looking at it of like, for some of us, and I'm not minimizing for others that it wasn't this way, but for some of us, it was a huge gift of time with my children that I would have never had. I got to know them on so many different levels, and vice versa, for a very prolonged summer vacation.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for a lot of people, I mean, like for you and I, it was a bit different in that we weren't working a typical 9 to 5 at home, trying to, homeschool or supplemental learning or all those things with our kids. It looked a little bit different for us. But especially with a lot of the clients that I've worked with, those that were working that 9 to 5, that were then having that guilt piece of like, what am I doing with my kids while I'm working? Who's helping them with their school? All those things. I feel like it was a really good opportunity to figure out, like, are these pieces that are in my life that are causing the stress? Like, is that how I actually want to live?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, we had no choice. We were pushed into the corner, no matter what our situation was, and really forced to acknowledge some of these things that were going on. And it's really easy to be like, it's fine. I was talking to somebody this morning who was talking about her job and how it's not ideal, but it's okay. Like, it's okay, I'll settle. And it was like, but do you have to settle? Do you want to settle? So that's what I mean. I feel like we were pushed into this corner and all these things came up for us. And it's a great opportunity to figure out, like, is this the way I actually want to live?
Yes. And if anybody listening has not reflected on that piece, please do so tonight, or pause and come back and just do a little bit of that reflecting. I think so much of that is conditioned on us through family and society and what we're seeing in our external environments, that this maybe gave you an opportunity to see differently, if we take the time to reflect on that, what we actually want that to look like. Like, I realized that I am totally okay with my kids being home for 6 months. I am 100% okay with that. I was excited for my kids to go back to school because they were excited, and I do like that they go and they get fulfilled and then they come back, and I do, and I crave alone time. I love alone time. Like, Janine's laughing because she knows how much I love my alone time. And that was tricky to navigate in the beginning because we were all together so much. So that piece was tricky for me, even though I didn't have an outside of work 9 to 5 job. But I know I can hang out with my kids for that long and it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't shame yourself if that's not your ideal life. But I know for us, we will travel in the next couple of years for long amounts of time. And because we've had this like trial run,
Yeah.
We know we're okay.
And we're the total opposite at our house.
Yes.
Like
yes.
I love spending time, yeah, I love spending time with my kids, and I loved all the things I got to do with them. And I was actually really grateful that it was during a time of the year where we could be outside, we could explore a bit more, like get out and do things. It wasn't like the dead of winter. But for my husband and I both, we were like, time with them is great, but we also need them to have their own thing.
Yeah.
Like I could never be a full-time stay-at-home mom. It's just not my thing. It makes me work extra hard to regulate my nervous system. Like it's just not my thing. So yeah, we were the opposite over here.
Which is interesting because our kids are similar ages.
Yeah.
But that being said, when my kids were little and I became a full-time stay-at-home mom, hated it. Did not enjoy it at all.
I was the opposite.
Yes, that's
so
right.
When I was really little, I was like, oh, this is great. I could do this forever. And then at this point, I'm like, no way.
Yeah, that is so funny that we have switched roles there.
Yeah.
Now I am like, yeah, you're good. You're independent. Like you can do your own things. I love this. Whereas when they were like needy and little and they needed me all the time, that was the most suffocating feeling. And I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Like I truly did, but it was suffocating for a couple of years there before I could be honest with myself.
And I think too, like this is not COVID related at all, but when we think about being a mom of kids that age, when I think back to that time, I feel like that is where I realized I was starting to lose myself in that neediness stage. Because for some reason, like I always joke, like, I don't like babies. I didn't like my own babies. My husband tells me not to tell people that because it's weird. But like, don't invite me to your baby shower because I don't want to hold your baby. When they turn like 1.5, like when I can do stuff with them, then call me and we'll hang out and I'll babysit them and it'll be awesome. Oh, but the neediness at that point versus like the neediness at this point is so different.
Yeah.
But I guess it's probably because I have refound myself. I've taken that power back at this point. Whereas like when my kids were so little, I had no idea that I actually had any power. I just thought like they ran the show and I just had to like follow along. And yes, they do.
They had to be number one and you couldn't be on that scale almost, or like you were so low on that scale.
Oh, I wasn't even on the scale.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of moms feel like that. And I know like even with my kids' friends' moms, like anybody that has kids my kids' age that I regularly associate with, the concept of putting yourself first and like taking that power back is like, people think I'm nuts, I'm sure.
I know.
Because it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you have to work from home in order to do that, or you have to like be self-employed. It's like, no, that was a choice I made.
Yeah.
And it's not about, it's just not about that. We can take power
because you still taught last year.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. And the year before.
The first time that I haven't stepped back into any sort of teaching role in the fall. I was a classroom teacher for many years and then a substitute teacher after that, while over the last 6.5 years now, also running businesses from home.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to navigate working full-time, having kids, running a business, and then figuring out like, how do I still put me first with all this stuff going on?
And I really think you have done an amazing job at that. Like I could not work a full-time job and do my business and put myself first and have the kids. You have a really beautiful way that you do navigate. And it's like, to me, I just always looked at it with you, like you were so good at taking it like week by week or day by day. Whereas I feel like in that space of all of those heavy balls is how I would look at it to juggle. I don't know how I would navigate. I know I wouldn't. I couldn't. One, I can't work for somebody. Two, I can't work 40 hours a week. Now that I haven't done that, like I just for some time, I cannot. Exactly. I
didn't take myself out of that full-time work role until like the last couple of years where I was just substitute teaching and would start to slow down or not substitute teach at all for periods of time, where I started to notice like, oh, this is where the differences are when I have more time freedom. But I think that there's this misconception around like, we have to take things off our plate. You know, and I find myself in that a lot of times thinking like, oh, people probably think that I'm able to figure this out because I don't have as much on my plate. I still have all the same things on my plate. It's just the narrative that's running is different. It's like, that's what's light. It's not like I took stuff off the plate to make the plate light.
Oh, I like the plate.
Yeah, like it has nothing to do with all of the things that we're doing, although we are saying yes to way too many things. And that's a whole nother story. But it's about what we're saying to ourselves about how busy we are, or about how we're parenting, or about how, you know, the wife that we are, or the friend, or the daughter.
I have a plate analogy to go along with that.
Ooh, okay. Tell me.
I never knew this would come in handy, this analogy, or like fit in perfectly to this. So we have all these plates that we spin.
Yeah.
Right? So we have all these spinning plates, and we think we're the plate. But we're not the plate. So if one of those plates crashes and breaks, we're still here.
That's right.
We're still whole. We're still like, if we can come at that as like, instead, I think we think of ourselves as like, we need to be constantly spinning all of these plates to make ourselves feel whole. When, you know, COVID's actually kind of an example. A couple of those plates probably fell.
Oh yeah.
During that time. And you were still here. You were still standing, not you in particular, but like all of us, we still made it through that time. And so we need to stop looking at ourselves as the plate that we need to continue spinning. It's okay. Like we're going to be okay with whatever area. Like this also makes me think of when we first moved here 2 years ago, and we had came at the end of September, and our kids couldn't be enroll in extracurriculars. We had missed the deadlines for what our kids would normally be in. And at first I was like, oh, I need to find something, especially we were new to town. My kids need to meet some friends. We need to get into those communities and networks and get to know the town we're in and people and stuff. And I just never really pushed for anything. And it was like the most magical 4 months of my life. There were no schedules, no timelines. We did what we wanted. It's kind of maybe detrimental for my children in that I got a taste of it. Like one of the plates crashed and I was like, actually, I don't like that plate. I don't want that plate back.
Is it detrimental for your kids? Because I'm sitting here thinking like, that was my experience with COVID, where all of a sudden I had these, like every single night was open, and like my husband and I were both at home, and you know, all of a sudden our schedule was cleared. And so I thought of like, at first I thought of it like, oh, my kids are missing out on all these things because my kids are each involved in probably at least 3 things. So we were going all the time. And so it caused me to stop and think like, but is this a bad thing?
No.
Like, did they need to be that busy? Right? Like, and so watching them and taking my cues from them, are they okay? You know, like, how are they functioning? How are they socially? You know, how are they emotionally? Now that things are opening back up again, like, how many things do I need to put them in? Do I need to put them in anything? What are their thoughts?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's, again, one of those pieces that we can be grateful for, that I don't know if I would have ever taken that opportunity to be like, just kidding, we're not putting you in anything. You know, because that was just what we did. And
they were missing out on something, or you were giving them something that they should have an experience for themselves. Instead, they learned how to automate their own nervous system during that time, and it's the best thing ever.
Yeah. So that's just another piece where we can just be grateful for change.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened. I don't know how else we would have come to that if it hadn't been for this forced slowdown.
Yes, I agree. Speaking of forced slowdowns, that's a perfect segue. You didn't even plan it, nor do you know where I'm going with this.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, you are guessing. So Janine and I have known each other like for 5 years, right? But I started to get more into the spirituality world maybe 2 years in, maybe even only a year. I'm trying to think when I like first gave you
in the closet though.
Yeah, I was, but like
you were doing this.
No, but I did recommend Gabby Bernstein to you, and you were like,
no thanks.
Big. And then I was like, oh, and then I went back in the closet because I actually recommended that book to like probably 5 or 6 people that I was like, this is life-changing. You have to read this book. It's the best thing ever. Oh my gosh. And like, I literally have multiple moments of like, I can see myself perfectly reading certain sections in that book. One is in a chair with a lamp on, one is in my bed, one is in my office. Like that book impacted me in a big way. And then I was like, oh, but it's not impacting other people. So I'm going to go back in the closet over here and not talk about it because I wasn't clear on it for myself too. Like I wasn't, as much as that book changed my life, it's not like I read the book and then I was like, oh, I'm spiritual. I wouldn't have even said that word in any capacity because I also looked at it as a religion, and religion was not a word that I had some injuries. My friend Tanya says around religion that I needed to work on. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it was, is I had a lot of injuries to heal. But I did stay on the bandwagon. I continued to learn for myself. And then I would have some conversations with you or other people, but I wasn't like super comfortable coming out with it. But in the last 6 months, I will get messages from Janine that I'm like, well, isn't that fascinating? Welcome to the other side. Come on in. It is home over here. And I found it so cool and fascinating because I stopped pushing it on anybody. That's actually an important lesson too. Just because something works for you in any type of personal development, whether that's spirituality, a certain book, any of those things, does not mean it's meant for somebody else.
Yeah.
It is meant for us and us only. And we can share if we feel called to share, but that doesn't mean it's going to, that it needs to be their cup of tea either. Like we've still been friends during that time for sure. But the biggest one was when she hurt her back a couple of weeks ago. And she said, actually, let me back up a few years. You would have all these shoulder issues. And I don't know if they were back. I remember shoulder for sure. And
there's always back issues.
I would try to twinkle it with like, what's going on with your life? It's connected to something emotional. And it would be like, slam that door right away. And so then I would be like, oh, backpedal, don't say anything to Jen. That's not her belief system. Like, and I was still like figuring it out for myself too, of whether I fully believed in that sort of thing. But in the last year, I've fully embodied that in so many different ways. And it's been quite a few aha moments with all of it, and like getting super honest with myself about things, not just like in other people. I don't mean, but like when I have a headache, yes, Jen, you've been overthinking and stressing about this aspect or this aspect, some aspect in your life. That is 1000% goes on. I have so many people that now that I live in Alberta, I forgot this was such a thing. They blame it on temperature change here and Chinooks. Oh, I have a headache because of a Chinook. Maybe. Okay. It's like, I realize you're not ready, so I'm not going to like push it on you, but it's probably not what's going on.
Yeah.
Probably not. And so when Janine had her back pain 2 weeks ago or whenever that started, it was a little bit of a long one. And you were like, I know that I am working through some stuff. And I was just like, oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, that mind-body connection. I feel like I started to, when I was diagnosed celiac, I started to recognize like, oh, hang on a second. Clearly these things are affecting my body. But I only looked at it from like a nutrition standpoint. Yeah. I didn't look at it in any other way. And so then like slowly over the years, thankfully, you would drip these things on me. And then
other ways you came about them too.
Yeah, like just other, coaches I'd been working with or programs I had taken, or eventually I jumped on the bandwagon and was like, oh, Gabby Bernstein is awesome. Like it has to be the right time. You have to be, I wasn't open to receiving any of this. So now that, or once I got to that place, definitely I do the exact same thing. As soon as something is not feeling right, I'm like, okay, like what's the message that I need to hear here? It has nothing to do with like, I need to medicate or whatever. It's like, I need to figure out where this is coming from so that I can then go back and do the work.
Yes.
And it's funny, the whole timeout thing, or the slow down, because when I did hurt my back, this has been a reoccurring thing. And I've also been doing the work for years now on this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it was one big massive injury now, because it was like, we're going to blow it up for you. And you really need to figure it out. It kind of, everything came to a head, and then I could be like, and goodbye, we're done.
Yes.
Not that it's going to be gone forever, but I worked through the big enough pieces of it that now I will catch it before it ever blows up like it did this time.
That's what I feel like too, that it like needed to like, it just will not be the same capacity at all that it has bothered you in any sort for the last while. I also want to like give you super kudos for, I personally think we're all intuitive. It's just whether we're open-minded to it or not, and when we're ready to feel it and be in those things. And you've really embraced that. Like a couple of weeks ago, maybe even just last week, Janine out of the blue messaged me with like, I think you said, do you need some love today? And I was having a really freaking hard day. And it was like, that was the first time I was like, oh, you're so in tune with you. It instantly switched me out of my own shit into excited for you, because I was like, you felt that. Like, that is a big thing. That is a real thing for anybody that's ready to hear it. You can feel energy from anywhere, from anybody, and you can send it too, like good energy all of the time. But I was just like, I can't believe she just messaged me with that. I'm so excited.
It's that empowerment piece, right? Like there's a number of things that happen before we can actually become empowered.
Yes.
And I feel like I needed to go through all of those steps to really find me again, to learn how to slow down, which didn't mean like, I mean, it did mean do less, but by doing less, I was doing more, which I realize may not make any sense.
Might not to anybody else, but I totally get it.
Yeah, like I needed to go through all those steps and have those experiences and do that work to figure out, oh, that is my intuition talking to me. Like I actually do have the answers. I need to trust myself. But it's really hard to empower ourselves to do that if we don't have the awareness, if we don't have the understanding of what's going on, if we're not open and willing to do the work. Like all those things have to come first. So it's possible to take back our power and to show up how we want to show up for ourselves fully, to show up for I have so many conversations about showing up for our kids or our partners. We can't do that if we don't show up for ourselves.
Nope.
So that's where the magic is.
So much yes to that, because it truly is whatever is inside of us. I think what came to mind there was the first answer is the right answer, which is something like I share with everybody and I had shared with me. But I remember being so frustrated by that in the beginning, because I was like, yeah, like I'm so past the first answer. I have no idea how to get back to like asking that question again and getting the first answer. I have answered that question 1 million times and it hasn't been nice answers between my ears at all either. So I'm so far gone from that. But when we do just practice makes permanence. And the more we practice getting into ourselves and empowering ourselves that way, the easier it gets.
And it's breaking some of those like societal norms or conditioning that we have from whatever it was, like I was such a strong believer that like, in order to have this life that I wanted, I had to like hustle hard. I had to do more. I think back to times where like a lot of parenting moments where I'm like, I can't, like now I laugh about it, but at the time I'm like, wow, like who was that version of me that was showing up like that? Like, how is that even a thing?
Yeah.
And just to have that awareness now that like, you don't actually have to hustle. It's not about like going every single minute of the day, that having that downtime is okay.
Yeah.
Like that was such a game changer for me. That in itself was a huge empowering piece.
I saw it as like not being productive.
Me too. And sometimes that still creeps in for me.
Me too.
Especially like, with this back injury, I spent almost 2 weeks. Like I could not sit in my office in a chair, which meant it was really hard for me to work on my laptop, or do a whole lot of anything. And so I spent a lot of time like laying on the ice pack, and I'm not one to watch a whole lot of TV, but I started watching a series on Netflix and I would catch myself being like, oh, you should be doing more. Like you're not doing enough. This is not money making. You're not being productive. And it was like, stop, just stop.
Oh, what a fascinating, even like maybe even that's part of the reason it happened, just because you're so aware, just for you to be able to watch somebody I was listening to recently was like, watch the show that you put on inside.
Yep.
And so like, as much as you were watching a Netflix show, you were also watching the show of what you were putting on, of like, oh, that's not what I need to do right now, but look at me telling myself that's what I should do, and that's not productive, that I'm not being productive, and
Right.
all of these
And
things.
and it was twofold, because I thought the message at first was that I needed to slow down physically. I
Yeah.
thought that like it was a physical pain because I needed to like rest, like stay still, your body needs to rest.
Yeah.
And so then as this continued for 2 and more weeks, I realized that the reason I was so drawn to watching something on Netflix was because I don't go to those mind numbing places anymore,
Yeah.
or not too often. I mean, yes, I get stuck in the scroll and all the things, right? But I don't go to those places too often where I am purposely numbing. And I realized I was purposely numbing. So I had to try and figure out like, where is this coming from? And it was like, my mind was just like, can we take a break for a bit?
Yeah.
Because I'm such an overthinker. I think all day long, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was really a twofold sort of lesson that I had to learn. But
So cool.
just grateful that I had that awareness, because it would have been a long 2 weeks if I was beating myself up the whole time. I actually don't think I would have healed as fast as I did, because mentally I just wouldn't have been there.
No, I agree. I think it would have dragged out the improper grammar, sorry teacher, for a much longer time there for you. Not just like, you pretty much, like, I know it was like a day or two process, but there was like a switch this week where you're like,
Oh, yeah.
hey, I can sit and I can walk and get in and out of the car, and like
I
things
had a
are
dance party yesterday, you know?
yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, it was time. It was just like the switch flipped, and did I say that in the right order? Yeah, the switch flipped,
Yeah.
and away we go. So,
Yes. I think let's just even touch on for a second about, because sometimes people aren't even aware how much they numb themselves. Like, we think of, I actually heard this analogy on the weekend and I really liked it. Or not even an analogy, it's a truth of, people drink to be present.
mm,
And I was like, that is true. Like,
yeah,
in the past, when I was younger, I'd be like, Friday night, it's been a long week, or Saturday night, or, all of those things. I would always be like, it has been such a long week. I
like
need,
I deserve this.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's twofold, I think, when we drink, of like, we've worked through, like, we deserve it for some reason, we justify it. But then the second one is, I would have such a good time when I had a nice buzz, let's be honest. And it's because we were being present in the moment of who was with you at that table, or, who you ran into or who you talked to, all of those things. And I was like, fascinating. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool. And I started to think about it recently, especially because I was, quote unquote, numbing
Yeah.
with Netflix. So it really made me think about it. And I had this conversation with a client too, who was feeling exactly the same way. And I think there's for sure a difference between, if you are on that growth journey and you like truly want to grow, you truly want to change, you truly want to show up for you, and you are doing the work, and then you are using Netflix, for example, like I was, to like,
Yeah.
it was not like I'm going to numb because I'm trying to escape from my life. Do you know
Agreed.
what I mean? So
Yes.
it's just like, this is just going to be, I can't even call it a reward, but it was just like, it was a break. I was using it as a break, not because I was trying to escape my life. I think on the flip side, when women are not on that personal growth journey, or they're not willing to acknowledge that there's things that they probably should change, or and so that's where the drinking comes from, or they are mindlessly watching Netflix or scrolling on social media for hours. That's a different kind of numbing.
Completely. And I do agree, because I did swing too far the other way for a while, of like, there was no TV in our house at all for like a year and a half. Like, the kids, I would let do a little bit of Netflix, but we had no cable, no, like, it was very, very limited. I will say, no, let me finish that and then I'll go back to the kids and TV. I used to stay up to like 12 o'clock 1 o'clock all the time in bed with my TV, watching whatever show I could get into. So, because I didn't know how to process what was going on. And I literally can remember being like, what show is going to make me feel a little bit better? How can I feel better with whatever I'm watching? And so that I had to watch things that were captivating for me so that I could turn off what was up here. And that was the only way I knew how. I didn't know anything different to do that with. I will say we cut out TV for our kids in the morning when we moved here, and maybe even when we moved to Stoughton, I think, actually. Yes. And before that, I remember a girlfriend saying when my oldest was 4, so this was like 9 years ago, we had had babies at similar times, and she was like, oh, we don't do TV. And I was like, are you nuts? Like, why? What's wrong with you? Like, it is the best thing ever. He gets up, he puts on the show, he eats his breakfast while he watches the show, he does like all of these things. It was like, I needed to make supper, watch a show, like all of these things. That was just like the total norm in our house. And then when we cut it out in the mornings, our mornings are so much better. My kids are not allowed to turn on a device. Like this morning, they're on a PD day, so they got to watch a show this morning and they were so excited about it. But there's no more arguing in the morning.
It's a game changer. And even like watching what we're doing or allowing our kids to do before bed. I find that to be a big one too. My son suffers from anxiety, and it shows up most prevalent at bedtime. And so he's old enough to have the conversation with him, like, not to tell him, hey, when you play video games before bed, like this is not helping you, but to have the conversation around like what is happening in your brain when you're playing video games and how it makes your body feel.
Oh, let's go into that.
Like start to make those connections, right? And I have to say, like, I'm going to give myself like a huge pat on the back here, because my younger one doesn't have the same, it's not that she doesn't have anxiety, but it doesn't show up the same as it does for my son. So he's 10, she's 7. And we have been working for years, like at least 4 years now with my son on his anxiety. And so now he, like, even last night, he called me into his room and said, I'm having troubles falling asleep, but here is what I've decided I'm going to do. And it feels really good. And he like walked me through a breathing exercise that he thought was like going to be the thing. I'm like, yes. Meanwhile, my son,
amazing.
I know, like, it's amazing. I call it like talk therapy. I think a lot of people are like, just stop talking and send them to bed. It's like, no, I will talk to him for hours. Well, okay, not hours, but like I'll talk to him for quite a length of time until he is in a place where he feels comfortable, because he's going to share more with me and he's going to get a better understanding of how his mind and his body are communicating.
How empowering.
We don't have to talk about this for hours every night. We're going to have a long conversation for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. We did that in the beginning. We don't have to have those long conversations anymore. But my younger one came home from school the other day, and with COVID, you know, as soon as kids have any sort of like sore throat, whatever, they have to go home. Well, one kid in her class went home with a sore throat, and she said by the end of the day, 6 more kids had gone home. And I thought, like, oh wow, do we have a lot of sick kids or what's happening? It happened again the next day. There was about 11 kids missing from their class. And so right away, I'm thinking, like, there's no way that many kids are sick, especially if one left and then 6 more left the same day. That just doesn't make sense to me. So anyways, I said to her, well, what do you think was going on? And she said, oh, I just told them that they probably just have butterflies in their tummy and that they're feeling nervous and that they don't have to worry. They're not sick. And I was like, so refreshing that, you know, she can pick that up. And, you know, like, we have conversations at the dinner table that I'm sure people think are weird, but they're so normal for us and they're so healthy in that, like, hey, what does anxiety feel like in your body? Oh, cool. This is what it feels like in my body. You know, it's just having those, our kids need that awareness. They can't regulate if they don't know how.
I know. So I love that you said that. I almost feel like I don't want to be on a reality TV show, but I kind of forgot for a minute that like people would probably find our house really weird. The conversation we have really, really weird because we do have extremely open conversations about all of those types of things, or death or sex, or like there are no topics in our house that we don't talk about as a family with even my 5-year-old around, and he'll get frustrated sometimes because he doesn't understand something that we're talking about. But I'm like, no, I am not withholding anything from a conversation with him, because I actually think our kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for. And I think that's just like something we've all been conditioned for generations to protect our children. It came from a loving place. But I actually think it's causing more anxiety and fear within our children to not have these conversations and to not know. And they're capable of knowing.
They'll go looking. That's the other thing.
And
with
you
the
don't get
answers they find, the answers they find are not the ones you want them to find, and then you don't even know that they went looking and found these answers, and so now they've got their own belief system that you don't have any control over. And probably the language in your house too. I know, like, the one day my son came home from playing with friends, and I don't even know what the story was, but the words out of his mouth were, "And I manifested that." And my husband was like, "Who are you people?" And I was like, "Oh, that's so cute. Yeah, you did manifest that. Good for you, honey."
That is so cute. How many 10-year-olds are running around thinking that, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating. It's fascinating, I think, how that will play out long term, to be honest, of what our children will see and what our grandchildren will see, and how things will shift, I think.
Absolutely.
In a very different way. There was something, I would love to touch on the video game thing, just because I said we were going to, and I don't know your full beliefs on this, but so please share your beliefs. I have such a hard time with video games. I hate them so much. But I have a 13-year-old, or 13 in 2 weeks here, who they are important to him, and I have had to, there is no COD allowed in our house, but there are other games that he plays that I do not agree with, that I have had to allow, because I don't want to fully take away either, because he's just going to do it anyway outside of the house, or he's going to be resentful, or, like, I want him to be able to make his own decisions. But in my feeling, studying, understanding of the body, he is in fight or flight constantly when he is on a video game. And that is what wreaks havoc on our nervous system for the rest of, like, he is building pathways in his body right now so there are, like, certain things that he has to do, he cannot do around video, like, it's quite limited on how long he can play for, and those sorts of things. I just think it's interesting that we don't educate our children. So, like, even my mother, she watched a documentary about video games and how bad they are. So then she continued to tell him about how bad all these video games are for him. And he was, like, resistant and angry and PO'd then about it. And I was like, I don't know if that was the best approach to take to get him off of it, because now he's resenting it, right? And the generations too. But I think it's fascinating that we're not educated on what is going on within us about the game.
Yeah, I mean, with my oldest being 10, it's a little bit different, but a lot of his friends play a lot of games that I don't agree with. I think at our house, I feel like there are times where I should be a little bit more, kind of like what you're saying, like, you don't want to take it all away because they're going to go do it anyways. We have really strict, like, my son is so into sports that he plays the same basketball video game constantly. And so he knows a lot of sports stats, like, to the point where when he talks, all I hear is like, blah, 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 blah. 'Cause I have no idea what he's talking about because I'm not into it. Yeah. But what I've done with him is explain to him, like, again, it's that conversation piece. It's inconvenient. It's really inconvenient to have these conversations because it takes a long time. They're usually at bedtime or at a time where, like, or morning. We're trying to get out the door. Yeah. The times where we need to have these most empowering conversations are the most inconvenient times.
I agree.
I want to go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. I don't want to talk to you for another 4 hours about something that, like, I don't think is really important, but it is important to them, right? So having that conversation around, like, playing, what is, I guess, coming to a common understanding of like what is okay in terms of like how much we're playing, what are we playing, who are you playing it with, are you using the chats? Like the chats is a whole different thing, because that is like, not even getting into that at all, but you know, I watch with my 7-year-old playing like whatever, not so much video games, but like games like apps on a device or that sort of a thing. And how, or for her too, for watching Netflix, she's really likes Full House on Netflix, and seeing the change in her when she's been watching it for a prolonged period of time, or playing a game for a prolonged period of time, and trying to get her like back to reality.
Yeah.
It's an addiction.
It's
And it's like their nervous system is like, don't take it away, don't take it away. I need more. Her thing is like 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes.
yeah.
And I'm like, this is not healthy.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's interesting. This came up in a conversation earlier today about why is it that when we were kids, we don't remember having, like, things didn't feel so heavy, or we didn't, you know, like our kids are totally aware that they have anxiety at bedtime, or they're nervous to go to school, or like in this conversation I was having, we don't remember having those conversations with our parents, or feeling like we were, you know, anxious or nervous or whatever the thing was. And my answer to that is video games. That is the only thing that's different. What did we do? We were outside, we were grounded. We were out in nature. We were getting fresh air. We were getting exercise. We were running around using our imaginations. What are our kids doing? They're inside by themselves on a device, and their nervous system is like, up here.
Yes.
They're not grounded. They're not outside. They're not getting any fresh air. So I think there just needs to be a balance.
So I will play devil's advocate on this a little bit, because of the age of my son. At 10, like, you're taking me back to exactly where I was. You were allowed to play, his thing was hockey. You were allowed to play hockey, and that is it. COVID happens.
Mm-hmm.
My son, so boys, I find, like, my 8-year-old would still like chit chat on the phone, and she had tea parties online, and you know, like, she was excited for Google Classroom, and they would chit chat for a few minutes, and all of these things would go on. They wrote letters to each other. You know, there was still communication. She still had that community piece. 13-year-old boys, I didn't feel they had that. They're not just going to call each other to shoot the shit.
Right.
And so this is where video games came back into our life
way
more than it was before.
And they talk in the chat.
They talk every night, and he has a blast. I can hear him downstairs. Like, you would think there's a party of 10 of them downstairs because he's so animated and excited and into, like, hey, so-and-so's on now. And like, I've listened sometimes to see what the conversation is about.
Yeah.
Just for like a moment. I'm not the helicopter parent that needs to know everything about, he needs to learn his own lessons and stuff. But we have had many conversations about online and safety online, because that is a huge concern of mine as well, and all of those things. But he's also at the age now that he's in junior high, and he walks home from school by himself across town, and he, you know, goes for a Slurpee by himself, and he's doing all of these things independently now, that I do have to have these conversations. And so for me now, I have a hard time with, he's now built community within this gaming area, and he, because of where we're at with activities going on, and there's a lot more cases here than there is there, and all of those sorts of things, but they aren't doing as much out of school. And he still wants that community piece. Like, right now he's off school for 4 days because of PD days, so he has an extra long weekend. And he doesn't, you know, like, they're not getting together in large groups somewhere to do something. They can't go swimming. They can't go to, they used to go play basketball together. They used to have a teen club that they would go to on Friday and Saturday nights, that they would go to the gym together and shoot balls, like, do all the different things. There isn't that stuff. And so I am struggling a little bit with this age group of, like, what can he do to be social away from this game? Because I know how detrimental to his system this video gaming is. We could go on for a whole hour about video games. We could have done that.
I think the biggest thing that comes up for me is that, like, if that's where the community piece is going to come in, Like, have at her. That's
why
fine.
I haven't taken it away too.
Yeah. But I mean, I know in your house, like, your kids all know this, and I think it's just important for others to be aware that, like, if that's the direction that you're going to go with your kids, like, that's totally fine. No judgment, whatever.
Yeah.
Just make sure that your kids have the tools and that you're ensuring that they are finding ways to ground themselves. Or, you know, like my 10-year-old asks me, can we do a meditation? You know, like, because that's common in our house. So
Yeah.
maybe you're not, you know, he's not going out with a group of friends, but maybe you're going out as a family, or he's going out with his siblings to be outside for a little bit. Or,
Yeah.
you know, like, I think it's just important that he can get the community piece, sure, from the video games, like, that's totally cool. Just as long as he has ways to regulate.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, because a lot of kids just don't, and their parents don't either. So if parents don't know how to regulate, they can't regulate for their kids. And that's why I talked about this the other day. We fight with our kids like we're also 7 years old or 10 years old or whatever.
We are.
Because it's just like, like, if we're not regulated and don't know how to quickly regulate when something escalates, we can't help them. We can't meet them where they're at. So I think that applies here too.
I think that's, huge. And I think we will continue this chat on another one in the future for sure, because I think it really does all tie together and really pull in. Like, I know maybe we should just so Owen, meditating is a thing for him.
Yep.
My oldest meditation is like pulling out his hair. He hates it, but he will walk to the river with me, and we will sit there and throw sticks or rocks or whatever into the river for an hour. That is super. Yes, exactly. Yep. What other tips do you guys have? I'm trying to think what else we do. We do yoga in our house.
Yeah.
Regularly, but
we try to do, especially right before bed, just to make sure that, especially if they've been out with friends or watching a show or playing games or whatever, try to kind of like to bring them down. We have them set up where they have like a reading lamp and things like that. They don't both love to read, but we've just built that routine in of like, I don't really care what you're reading. It could be a magazine, whatever.
I bet you it will come. Just so you know, both my older two are avid readers now, and they were not in the beginning.
Yeah, like, and mine don't mind, but I think like if we have to model that.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to be like, you should go do a meditation. But if we're not doing that, then why would they do that? You know, right? So they're only going to buy into things that we are already doing.
Yeah. So, that makes me think of like back to the reality show of there was a kid that stopped by at our door on the weekend, and Blake and I were both doing a meditation like mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
So my kids are like, I can't play right now. My parents are meditating. Oh my gosh. You know, like if that's not your world, that would just have to sound really like meta. What? You know, to a 7-year-old.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It is. It just like it becomes the norm for them. The more they see it, the more. Totally. Actually, I said that in my newsletter this week of my mom, you know, would have amazing insights that she would share with me as a teenager. I remember like some of them will come back, but she didn't follow them. Yeah. And so I think that was part of the issue for me in my 20s of like, I knew these wise words from my mother, but she wasn't fully practicing them, which has helped me to recognize. So like she took the first step. Mm-hmm. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to build on that with my children of like, I'm going to try to do as much of these things as she was telling me to do and really practice them in my life and then just continue. I can't believe how much I talked about my mom today, actually.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Anyway, we have gone on for a while now. So how can people get a hold of you?
So they can find me on Instagram at Janine Chay, Chay with a C, like Chay. Yeah.
Link is in the comments, or link is below.
Okay, perfect. And then on Facebook, same thing. Website is in the works of like revamping out of like the belief and mindset coach and into the empowerment coach with lots of new programming coming up. There's just really so many exciting things that it just is kind of all organized under one umbrella now. So we're moving, but JanineChay.com is still there temporarily anyways. So you can check that out. Yeah, I think those are the main places to catch me. And
I love it. And I
yeah,
just
like
too want to
reach out
share
with any questions. And
that Janine talks about like just being a woman, period. We didn't even talk about relationships actually, which I thought we would have today, because you have had some huge transformations there for yourself and your family. So women and kids, and you don't have teens yet, but you have crazy insight, I think, from your years and years of teaching and this personal development side, and really meshing those together, that I feel like your future will hold a large piece of that for sure, because you're very passionate in that area. And yeah, just like, I just want to share that with people, that you share all sorts of goodies on your page. It's not just like, this is for moms and, or this is for this. There's, every day is a different, not every day, but
just
like,
depends what
there's a
I'm
lot
feeling.
of great things.
Yeah, depends what the lesson is that's downloading that day that I feel like people need to hear. So
Can we
sometimes,
just pay attention to that? You just said that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Sometimes it's more related to parenting. Sometimes it's something, yeah, I have a soft spot for teachers. I have a soft spot for network marketers. I have a soft spot
Yes.
for moms. Um, yeah, sometimes it's like money, mindset stuff. Sometimes it's relationships. So it's kind of like really just empowering women overall and meeting them where they're at, because your story that you're telling yourself is not actually, it's not you, it's just a story, and you can change that. And so that's, yeah, just like to meet people where they're at, and away we go from there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
You bet.
And make sure you guys check out the links below so that you can connect with Janine and follow along the journey and see all of the new exciting things she has coming up.
Thanks, Jen.